Hello, good morning and welcome to a bright, sunny autumn morning, crisp in the Midi of France region. This is the circuit of Magny Cours, the home of the French Grand Prix and the venue for the 10th, the final, the deciding race in the FIA GT Championship for the year 2000. Hello, I'm Martin Haven. I'm delighted to say alongside me in the booth and helping out with his words of wisdom and rather sad jokes, Andrew Gilbert, Scott. Andrew, there was a little threat of rain in the Met forecast a couple of days ago for Sunday, but I can't see any coming from the cloudless sky we've got here today.
No, it really is a beautiful day. It's nice, and it's not exactly hot, but it's just fantastic for the drivers. Perfect conditions. So all in all, probably a little bit less exciting in the spinning and the fracas situation, but should be for a stunning race.
Well, we've already had cars departing the track, as you often get in practice, even a couple of cars going off in the warm-up. But as you say, no return, I think, to the disastrously wet conditions that the championship has been struck by. It seems almost at every turn this season. It's going to be beautiful crisp conditions for this 11 o'clock start to the race, and this allows the drivers in championship contending positions, which are Lister pair Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter, and the Viper driver Mike Hazemans, a good chance to actually fight this out man to man. The two Listers dominating practice on the front row of the grid. The Car Sport Holland car of Mike Hazemans and his partner this weekend, Tom Coronel, already a winning combination from Austria. They start third, and the way that the mathematics works, well, basically, if the Listers finish first and second, then Hazemans has lost the championship. If the Julian Bailey car finishes down the order, Hazemans has to win, with Julian in second place, or to be second place, he needs Julian to finish all the way down in sixth position at best. So it is stacked a little bit in favour of Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter in the Lister, but still I think we're really going to be seeing a very competitive battle. The time's very, very close in this morning's warm-up, and the Lister drivers were quite surprised they were so close. In qualifying, the top 7 cars covered by a second, and we're looking here at pictures on board one of the NGT cars. This is the, well, essentially field for GT3R Porsches, although there are a couple of Ferrari 360 Modnas there as well, and that is the second element of this two-class racing series. Now, the championship there already tied up by Christophe Bouchou, who's had just a blinding season in his Labre competition car. And Bouchou, former Works Mercedes prototype driver, or sports car driver in the GT1 category a couple of years ago. And at Le Mans, he has dominated that. They've been the fastest car from the word go, and the opposition have really struggled, I think, to stay on terms. Well, the car's being led round, not by the car that leads the championship, Andrew, but by the second Lister, which has been, actually was the only original car, as Lawrence Pierce was telling us yesterday, the Lister boss, entered in the championship. The Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter one is one that Lawrence is paying for himself, essentially, with the Newcastle United raft of sponsors that backs his British championship efforts. And having won the 4 races at the beginning of the season, Lawrence felt that it was perhaps a little churlish then to withdraw the Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter entry. But leading the field round is the 15 car, which is driven by Nicolas Springer and Philippe Favre. And they have only used one of their 2 sets of tyres in qualifying, so they've got a brand new set of tyres to use for the start of the race. Andrew, does that mean that they're going to have a big advantage, do you think?
Well, no, it appears that the tyre degradation, as if I can say it, actually isn't too bad here, so I don't think it will make so much difference. But the interesting thing is, obviously, with Philippe Favre starting at the front, he's obviously not in with the championship hope, but he's there to sort of spoil the party. So it'll be very interesting. Having tried to find out, I had a good chat with him this morning. Obviously, he's not going to say too much, but it will depend on the position of Jamie, who is apparently starting, as to how he'll probably play the race. So he'll either be trying to hold up or bunch up everybody, but it could be quite interesting. Anyway, all will be revealed very shortly.
So the safety car pulls off. The field 2x2 formation being controlled by the driver starting the number 15 car. And they wait for the green light, away they go, and immediately it's the Car Sport Holland machine looking for a move. He pulls out and gets past Julian Bailey, or in fact Jamie Campbell-Walter, who we believe is a last-minute change in to starting the car. And so the Listers already being split by the orange Viper, and this is very important. One of the Belmondo cars has gone off. That's the number 12 machine, and Boris de Richebourg, Vincent Boss sharing that. Now, the 3 Belmondo Vipers were right behind the top 3 in qualifying. They were 4th, 5th and 6th on the grid, And I wonder whether that means the race directors will now, with him off on lap 1 in the first corner, effectively look for a safety car situation and restart the race afresh. They have the ability to do that. A race lap hasn't been completed, so effectively they could say the race hasn't started. Julian Bailey getting down on the run down to the first couple of corners, getting ahead of his teammates. So Julian Bailey and Jamie Campbell-Walter leading. The Ferraro 550 Maranello at the side of the road, stationary. Oh dear, well, we were expecting drama perhaps later on in the race as we got towards the conclusion. Obviously we can't even get away from the starting line without dramas and crises. We'll have to wait for word from the organisers to see whether or not they're going to restart the race or whether they'll allow it to continue with yellow flags out there at the first corner. It's a left-right sequence as they come over the start line. Julian Bailey, Jamie Campbell-Walter's car now coming down to the final corner. This circuit, of course, so familiar to Grand Prix racing fans as the French Grand Prix home. And there's no sign of a yellow or a red flag at the starter's gantry. Yellow waved flags now as they come towards the first left-right sweep. So a fairly breathless start, but Julian Bailey's done what he needed really to get ahead of Tom Coronel's car. Well, further back in the NGT field, you just saw them coming across the line a moment or two ago. A big three-way battle just behind the top half dozen. Very fraught. This is not Julian Bailey, this is Jamie Campbell-Walter, as we were told, a late change to the starting lineup. Julian was supposed to start, as was Tom Coronel, in the Car Sport Holland machine. As you could see from the onboard there, Jamie Campbell-Walter definitely the wheel of the Lister, and we think Mike Hazeman's the driver with the championship challenge in the second machine on the race and in the points. 4.5 points separate them. 4 points separate victory from second place. So as you can see, if this is the result at the end, then the Lister wins. But even if it's reversed without any other interloping cars, the Lister drivers will still win by half a point. And Andrew, we were talking to Julian earlier on, and he was saying, you know, they were going to try and run their own race, but it was important for them to be on the front row of the grid and to be in a position to dictate the pace. And that looks as though it's exactly the way it's happened. They were hoping that the Nicolas Springer Philippe Favre car would allow them in on the run down to the first couple of corners into the lead, and then hopefully block the Car Sport machine. But still, Jamie's able to lead the race and do it at his own pace. Yeah,
I would expect Philippe to try and get in there and again try and actually act as a buffer. But peering out of the window, I can definitely see Tom Coronel down in the pit lane. So it is definitely Heisman who's driving the car with Jamie. So a lot of gamesmanship going on. It was, I think, literally they were standing outside the cars, both of them, and just hopped in the last minute. Obviously, it's the first time. Julian's always started this year, so perhaps they just feel it was trying to upset the rhythm that the opposition would know, so as to just take away perhaps any of their thoughts of how they were going to play it.
Well, I think so. It's certainly a little bit, it seems as though there might have been a little bit of gamesmanship going on there to just rattle them a little bit and make them second guess what the strategy was. And maybe the race strategy might play a part here as well, because the 3-hour race normally divided into 3 equal segments of around an hour, but there is possibly the chance that we may see one of the teams just making a single stop as opposed to the normal 2. We'll have to wait for the race to develop to find that out. Early days in the 3-hour final race in the FIA GT series from Magny Cours, and the cars starting to stretch out a little. Not the top 3 though, but in qualifying, I'm surprised, having seen their qualifying and their warm-up pace, that there are no Belmondo Vipers immediately evident. We saw the number 12 car getting knocked off, and that was only the third placed of those on the grid, and I'm really surprised there's no yellow and white Vipers there, Andrew.
No, I know that seems to be kind of what we expected in so many ways, though. There's this battle, a championship battle going on at the front, and they seem to be really on their own with it. It will be interesting to see whether they can just hold this pace up or whether it is basically too quick, because if they're going too quick and they damage the tyres too early on, then obviously it could upset the length of time that they're on those tyres, and they may end up having to pit stop early.
Well, we know that the Springer and Favre car, number 15, the third placed Frisian cow paint scheme, if you like, the black and blobby white car as opposed to the black and white slightly more meticulously striped car.
Having a look down the inside, yes, he's got in there, so that's
That's always a tricky move there down at the Adelaide hairpin. We see it so often in Formula One drivers making a late stab there because it's a very difficult run through the first, through the sweeping curves that get you down there with a high downforce car. Now these aren't quite so bad. Julian Bailey saying it's not so much of a problem there, but they're big hefty cars to stop. Now the advantage that Favre had there is not only, as I was about to say, a brand new set of tyres that they didn't use in qualifying, so they've got less life in them, but also he's only carrying 20 kilos of success ballast. The Bailey Campbell Walter car and the Hazeman's Coronel car, both with 100 kilos, fully laden. So effectively they've got a fairly decent sized adult passenger alongside them, whereas the 15 car now in second place is lighter, and so it brakes easier and it accelerates quicker as well.
It will be interesting because I wouldn't expect Philippe to overtake Jamie. I would have thought that he should just sit there and act as a buffer, as tempting as it might be for him to try and take a stab if he can, particularly because you said the car being lighter will be much better under brake, so he should be able to brake that little bit later. But I still would be surprised if he made a stab or tried to upset Jamie when obviously with the championship situation the way it is.
Because the very worst thing that he could possibly do is miscue it. And if he cannons the Campbell Walter car off into the gravel, then he really ought to just look for a circuit entrance and head off into the middle of France and keep going, because he would not want to go back and face Lawrence Pierce. I agree, and I would think maybe, you know, in a dozen or so laps, maybe something like a halfway or a third into the stint that we're expecting them to run, when he's got 20 minutes of racing under his belt, then his tyres will be at more of an advantage perhaps than they are now over Jamie. And if he feels the car is quicker, then in terms of points it's not so much a problem. If he gets out there and holds the lead, and the car can hold the lead, at least it's denying maximum points to the Hazeman's and Coronel car. So for Jamie Campbell Walter and Julian Bailey, all right, they're one away from a victory. But if it gets down to the last lap and they're still following their teammates, then you know that the swap will be made over. So it wouldn't be too much of a problem. But as you say, he will have to pick his moment very carefully. And I think there'll be a lot of two-way radio conversation with Lawrence Pierce on the Lister pit wall before that was to happen, if it was to happen. Looking further back at the Car Sport Holland entry, it's the number 39 car battling with the Belmondo Viper, and the 11 Belmondo car, that is Marc Duez being brought in, the Belgian driver, rally driver, racing driver, saloon car ace, pretty much man of all trades. He's driving with team boss Paul Belmondo. They were the best of the cars throughout practice, but well, they're some way back behind this lead group. So the race starting to settle down. And obviously, having said that, we will now have immediate catastrophe among the leaders, but you can see how far they are ahead of the rest of the field just on that long shot coming onto the straight. The pair of Listers now starting to stretch away from the Hazeman's and Hart car. And we were hearing before the start of the race that the Car Sport Holland team believe that they may be in a bit of a fuel problem situation. Lister were keeping their cards very close to their chest, but Mike and Twan Hazeman's think that their car is not going to be as economical as they had actually hoped it to be. So it may just be now that they're in third place, that he's going to rest a little bit and just... It's very early, only 5 laps done, to say, well, you know, sort of take it easy and save a bit of fuel. But I don't think in endurance racing there's ever too early a time to start saving a bit of fuel if you know you may well come up short someplace.
Well, no, that's right. And if in many ways they might feel that if they could save themselves some fuel, it would give them actually that bit of leeway. Maybe it will actually, again, lull a bit of gamesmanship, lull the Lister team into thinking that that's kind of, they've spent what they're going to be able to do, and then they're holding back a bit. So, you know, when Tom gets in the car, they can give it the full 9 yards. So it could be quite an interesting situation.
The other thing, of course, is that Mike Hazeman's can see just how close the 15 car is to the 14 car, and thinking, well, I'm not right up Jamie's backside, but he's got another car right there that may just become an irritation and start to distract him a fraction. So let's leave the Springer and Favre car to be right behind Jamie. I mean, for a teammate, he's only a couple of car lengths behind. As long as he doesn't start making moves, then it won't worry Jamie too much, I don't think, because I don't suppose he'll be expecting anything to come flying in, from a great distance behind him. So he'll be able to use an aggressive racing line rather than a defensive racing line. Well, now we've been talking about the GT battle out front. That's where the championship is. But of course, half the field here in the NGT class. And Christophe Bouchou leading that category at the moment. The number 52 car is in 8th place, and as we talk about it, so he appears. And that gives me a chance, I think, to introduce a guest in the booth that will be familiar to British viewers. Jeff Lister's been racing in the British GT Championship in a GT3R, and racing also here in the FIA series. Now he's taking his racing hat off and putting his headset on. The Pennzoil cars, the G-Force crew, been racing all the way through the championship, finding it a little bit difficult, I think, to find an answer to the Labour competition car. Do you think this is something with the team that's set up, or is it really that Christophe Boucher is just so dialed into the machine it's hard to find a way to combat his speed?
Christophe is a brilliant driver. He's done a great job all year. That's not in question. I think the difference is G-Force got their cars very late. They had them the week before the first race. Christophe had his in October the year before. That winter of development just gave them what we're seeing, which is a second a lap. You know, it's easy in GT racing to lose a second, and it's perhaps because we didn't get the cars early enough that we haven't found that second, and that's frustrating for us. We've been working hard all year, but with the race the way they've come this year, the first 3 races being so tight, they didn't give us chance to catch our breath, do any development work, and we've just been behind the 8 ball, for want of a better word, all year.
Well, of course, your fortunes in the British GT Championship have been similar but slightly different, because you have been racing there with Terry Reimer in one of the PK Racing Porsches, and at the beginning of the season, the Mike Jordan car, which ended up being the championship winner, was in a similar position to Boucher, just absolutely sort of disappearing from the rest of the GTO class, as we call it in Britain, essentially the same 911 GT3R Porsches. But as you've worked with the car, and particularly, you know, the speed of the drivers, the way that you've been able to set it up, I think you finished the season every bit as much a front runner as the champions. So that must be encouraging as well. When you come here to the same machine, you know what works in Britain. Do you find that it works on the tracks in Europe as well?
Yeah, we do. In Britain, you know, winning the 3 of the last 4 races was a big morale booster, and just showing that you can get what was a slightly slower car at the beginning of the year right up and to the sharp end of the grid. We've tried to do that this weekend again. This track is incredibly hard, you know. Stopping a GT car to the extent that you have to do all the time here is a big concern. But we've worked through the weekend. You know, I had a big off yesterday morning in qualifying. The first corner isn't flat.
All right, okay, so we have that officially now, okay.
and you know, that's the situation. We should have been a few places up the grid. We definitely felt that third was a true reflection of where the car was. It was my fault. I've got to be brave enough to admit that.
Now, your partner back home, Terry Reimer, is he interested in taking over some of this GT stuff in Europe as well, and sort of stretching his legs a little bit?
Yeah, Terry's a great guy, learns a lot this year, and is quick now. He deserves a place in FIA. That's his goal, and he's going to be a madman.
This would have been the season for him, having seen his qualifying performances in the rain as well in the British Championship last time out at Silverstone in the deluge. You know, he would have been quite sparkling here in wet qualifying as well. Well, we'll pick up with that in a moment as we watch the battle with the leaders continue.
Do you want me to stay?
So, continuing in the 10th and final race in the FIA GT series, we're looking at the battle here for 4th place behind the leaders. This is Marc Duez and Peter Cox, both of them drafted into their respective Belmondo and Carsport Holland teams as additional drivers. Carsport Holland running a second car here this weekend to try and somehow maybe help influence the battle between Lister and their teammate Mike Hazemans for the Drivers' Championship. In the booth with me, Martin Haven, is Andrew Gilbert-Scott, who will put back on headset in a moment again, but also from the GTO class, or the NGT class as it is here, Jeff Lister, who drives for the G-Force team in the NGT battle. Now, your guys, where are you? You are currently lying, best of your cars, 4th place in class. Magnus Wallander in 4th place, just ahead of Tim Sugden, and by not very much either. And the 51 car with Robert, who is doing your opening stint in, 6th position in the class. So as you said, problems in practice always have that knock-on effect. No matter how well you are in tune with the car, you lose time. And this, I guess, would be for G-Force, like pretty much everybody else here, their first time at Magny Cours. Is it a difficult circuit to get a feel for, as opposed to actually learn where it heads?
We've just not had a lot of grip out of the car all weekend. It's a very slippy circuit. You know, although the sun's shining, the circuit temperature has been very cold. So that's made the cars move around a lot. And it has been hard work all weekend. But the circuit's great. And the Pennzoil cars, we've got a good balance in it. We've got a good race car. The big concern is making the fuel last as long as we can, because we don't want to be in the pits too long. It's going to be a difficult race.
Now, in the American Le Mans series that we've been showing on Eurosport, a GT car, a GT3R car like yours, will do a one-stop 2-hour 45 race. Is it a one-stopper in a 3-hour race, or is that just too much to ask of the cars?
The truth, we need a pace car.
Right,
they get pace cars in America. We're about 5 litres short. It's as silly as that, you know. 5 litres, 2 laps on both stints would see us to the end. It's annoying.
Wow, that's close. That's close call. Well, certainly it's going to be very tough indeed for one of the front-running GT cars to do a one-stop strategy. But Julian Bailey and Jeff Lister were saying yesterday that, not Jeff Lister, I'm saying the Lister, I'm getting the Listers confused. Lawrence Pierce, the Lister boss, was saying that they have got a very flexible fuel stop window, so they may well start playing jiggery-pokery games. I think they've basically loaded the car up with absolutely every drop it'll take, and then to give themselves the flexibility of coming in and matching the Car Sport Holland car if they need, or getting themselves sort of out of sync with them if they need to. And despite that, they are leading the race. Jamie Campbell-Walter out front, and some great onboard views there, showing you still just how low the sun is coming in through his side windows when we've been watching the onboard camera. And that bears out very much what you've been saying, Jeff Lister, that although it is bright and sunny, it is still crisp and autumnal, and the circuit here at Magny Cours is not a high grip abrasive circuit anyway, so I think perhaps well, they were saying left rear tyre might be the one that suffers here, but I don't think they will be worrying quite so much about tyre wear as they might at other places, a little bit more about fuel consumption. Well, we'll let you go. Thank you very much indeed for coming up and chatting to us.
No problem.
That's great. We'll follow your progress through the rest of the race and rejoin the action. Andrew Gilbert-Scott, you've been watching the monitors and the lap charts. Now, what are the timing screens telling us about the respective speeds of these top 3 guys? I mean, they're all still nose to tail. They seem to be able to match each other on pace, if not on strategy. That will all sort of unveil itself later, though.
Yeah, they seem to be, absolutely. I would say Jamie is actually, you know, if you like, the limiting factor. But obviously, you know, Philippe's there as a buffer. But it would appear Hesselman can do whatever he needs to be able to come back. Looking at the time, he takes 2 tenths off quite comfortably when he needs to. He took 4 tenths off in the 2 laps. Then he dropped back the 2 tenths. The traffic, of course, is playing a factor as we're looking down now. Yes.
Oh dear. Now I think the camera angle there slightly misleading. It did look for a moment as though
aggressive.
Philippe Favre was having a look at Jamie, but I think that was just a misleading camera angle.
Yeah. Well, he needs to try and keep on the move as well, because if he actually gets himself too far behind, because once you're in traffic, it's so much easier.
Oh, and he is,
as we were saying,
caught in traffic, exactly as you were saying. Yes.
Yeah. This is exactly what can happen, and I mean, you know, he tries to get through in behind the car in front. We couldn't see exactly whether the other car touched him or whether he just got caught out by it, but this is the traffic, this is what can happen. I think it'll be interesting, because I think we'll see that he got the pace just to be able to come straight back, as long as he hasn't done anything. But of course, there's suddenly the cushion's gone.
That's right, yeah, the rear gunner has gone for Jamie. It'll be interesting now to see what the Orange Viper does, what Tom Coronel, or as we think it is Mike Hasemans, in the car actually does.
Yeah, it will, because now is his chance. He'll be delighted with that. That will give him inspiration and enthusiasm. And of course, now it's Jamie's going to be bound to see the orange car.
Now that was very interesting, because Favre went past Jamie.
Yes.
So in fact, when we were so there you are. This is the curse of Murray Walker. We were looking at the timing screen, and then we came back and said, "Oh, look, that looks a bit aggressive." Philippe Favre having a look there, but in fact, he'd already gone past Jamie, and maybe Jamie there was balked on the run up to the corner by a slower car, decided to go, you know, one way, and the slower car went the same way. But I think that from what we saw of it, I don't think Philippe Favre actually touched the other car, because there was certainly nobody else in the corner stationary. But I think that he probably just tried to get his nose inside and then really had to anchor up hard. It's, you know, in road driving, most drivers will understand that when you brake for a corner or a roundabout or whatever obstruction, there is always a bit more. Now, in racing, generally, there is never a bit more to come from your braking, and if you have to stand on the brakes even harder, then inevitably it all locks up and the thing is out of control. So there is really very little margin for error, and so if you do get a situation like that a car-sized gap suddenly becomes not a car-sized gap, then contact or a spin are pretty much on the cards anyway, aren't they?
Yes. No, I mean, it's always happening. I mean, the cars, they're driving them on the limit. Jamie will be trying to stay within an acceptable level of the limit, but whatever one says, there only has to be a bit of traffic or a bit of oil or a bit of gravel, whatever, and of course the cars will spin and the drivers will go off. So that's always in the back of their mind. So now Jamie's actually obviously setting the pace. He'll do what he considers to be acceptable, whereas Husman is not. He will be doing whatever he possibly can to catch up. And as Jamie was saying to me yesterday, he feels that it's far more difficult to be the one trying to control, not to take the risks. You've got much more to lose. I mean, basically they've got the championship to lose. Husband car, the orange car, Coronel, have got the championship to win. So he said it's probably, you see there, the locking up the tyres. He's pushing very hard.
He is pushing very hard. Down in fifth position, you can see the second of the Car Sport Holland cars ahead of him, which is Peter Cox. And that's going to be a tough car to get by, because Cox now realises that he can stick a fly in the Lister ointment. He'll obviously have passed the stationary Favre and will now try his level best to hold him off and keep him out of the battle up front. 13 laps into the final race in the FIA GT Championship. We're looking here at Philippe Favre in the second of the Lister Storms. Not a championship contender, but certainly a lever perhaps in the battle. Chasing Peter Cox in the Car Sport Holland Viper, but not the one that's got the championship contending driver Mike Hasemans as part of its lineup. So we're looking here at the two supplementary cars, which each of the teams were hoping would somehow play a part in the lead battle, having their own battle to try and get back into a position to be able to do so.
Exactly. Well, I spoke to Peter earlier on, and he wasn't familiar with the car. He just turned up to get to do this race, and he was saying to me that this morning he was very quick, he's very happy, and he feels that now he's got the pace, and it will be interesting. He's also fairly well known for being an aggressive driver in the touring cars.
Dear.
That sort of he takes no prisoners, I think is fair enough. So it will be interesting. He's out there to spoil the party again. So when Philippe catches up again, when he overtakes these the slower cars, it should be quite an interesting battle.
I think so too, yes. Peter Cox, as viewers will be seeing later on, shortly after midday, when we run our review of the Euro STC Championship, where he's been racing the Honda Accord all season. Yeah, very, as you say, very aggressive, and in super touring, it's absolutely the way you have to drive these things, absolutely flat out, and no prisoners at all, because any slight wavering on the throttle and the rest of the field will spring past. But yes, very graphic show there as he ran down into the final chicane, just how little shrift he is giving everybody in traffic. So yes. Now out front, still Jamie Campbell-Walter leading for Lister in their number 14 car, their lead car. There's confirmation on screen. The gap come down though to 3.0. Oh no, it hasn't. It's gone up from 1.86 to 3.03. Jamie's last lap 138.5, and Tom Coronel's last lap 139.2. Now 0.7 of a second of a lap between the two of them, and that doesn't sound like an awful lot. And if you were talking about 10-lap Formula Ford race at Silverstone, it wouldn't be. But in over 3 hours, if the list is even half a second a lap quicker, then Car Sport Holland guys have really got to pull something out of the bag. At the moment, Jamie knows he's got fuel in hand. He knows that he's got to stay out of harm's way. And, well, Tom Coronel, maybe he's just trying to run an endurance race, which is race at the pace you know you can survive no matter what anybody else is doing. Because if you chase the front runners, I mean, this is a classic Porsche tactic. If you chase the hare, then you ruin your own race, because at the end you're going to be running out of fuel or running into having to slow down problems. So, you run your own pace, and I think maybe that's what the Car Sport Holland car in second place has settled down to doing at the moment.
Yeah, but obviously Tom's not actually in the car at the moment, so he'll be waiting there. So it'll be interesting. I'm not absolutely sure how much the difference of the pace between the two drivers will be, but like I say, it may just be that if they can try and, obviously the fuel is a factor, so if they can try and be sensible with the fuel at this stage, maybe that's what they feel they'll be able to use. Maybe Tom will be able to just squeeze a bit more out if he's got that fuel. So that will be an interesting factor, but of course he's got to be in the part, he's got to be able to be close enough to be able to get involved, and if he's going to lose, like you said, a few tenths a lap, that'll add up to far too much, probably, to be able to claw back later on.
Yeah, there's no point in having 20 litres of fuel left at the end of the race if you're a lap behind. So yes, it is a balancing act, and they've had a reasonable amount of practice here. It hasn't been interrupted by rain. Conditions have been reasonably stable, so they should have a fairly good handle on what fuel economy they're getting around here, and if they haven't, then I think they are a little bit in trouble. You're looking there at the Chirot car, the Labre competition car that leads the NGT class. This is the Christophe Bouchou car, and already working his way through the slower of the GT class cars, the GT2 Porsches as opposed to the GT3Rs. The car ahead of him is Franz and Nico Witt, a German father and son combo. Now this is a very early stop for what is essentially Christophe Bouchou's main competitor, and has been all season in the NGT class, the 77 Red Bull racing car. Luca Riccitelli and Hans-Jörg Hofer have run this car almost all season. Now they're in a pair of Red Bull cars, and Luca Riccitelli in this car has been joined by Dieter Quester, who sports car fans will know need no introduction to, and ditto for Hans-Jörg Hofer's new partner Bob Wallach, who is probably needing no introduction to any motor racing fan across the planet. Bouchou's still out front though by a substantial margin. His co-driver will be Patrice Gousselard, and they have not yet stopped. They're currently running in 8th place overall, and that looks about to go up to 7th place overall as they catch the Witt GT2 Porsche that's running a little bit ahead of them on the road. In fact, just a few seconds, 1, 2, about 3 seconds as they cross the line, according to my counting out of the window. So race leader Jamie Campbell-Walter, Julian Bailey in the pits, and as you said at the beginning of the race, this is a complete change around. They've never done this so far in to my recollection, actually, I don't think they ever started Jamie in the British GT series last year when they were partners either. Jamie was always coming out of the pits after the stop, which is a one-stop race in the British series, and with either Jeff Lister, who we spoke to earlier, or Magnus Wallander in their GT1 Porsche bearing down on him inevitably, and Tim Sugden in the MK McLaren that he'd taken over, charging hard up into 3rd place. So I don't think that Jamie's ever started the race, and if they're going to have to do 3 stints, then I would think with 17 laps in, maybe in another 5 laps or so, Jamie might be thinking of coming in and giving Julian a sort of substantial middle stint and then getting in at the end. I really don't know what the plan would be, and I think part of that also means that for Lawrence Pierce and the Lister crew, means that Mike Hazemans and the Car Sport Holland team also have no idea what's going on. Now further back, I think we just saw a glimpse of a move by Favre on Cox. Let's see if we can see it further back. I think Cox was behind the Lister there. They came out of the corner. We're looking just ahead of them on the road at Marc Duez, the 3rd place car. But if the director would just hold the shot, yes, he did.
Has, yes.
So Philippe Favre got up into 4th place ahead of Peter Cox. Now that's an interesting change, because if he can then latch onto the back of Marc Duez, he may well be able to do the same thing and then get back up into 3rd place.
Well, it's interesting also, looking at the first 2 are doing around about the 141 mark, and the 3rd cars are doing a 138.5 and then a 39.2, so it could well be that front end is joined by a bigger party. They're catching up quite considerably.
Well, you can see the queue of cars here that the number 11 car is...
Philippe has done it again.
Now that's very interesting.
Well, it was interesting because I was speaking to Philippe, and he was saying that the difference between the 2 cars was the fact that he likes the front end softer. He actually has it so it's got a more dip, more dive, and so it has a bit more bite supposedly on turn in. Well, maybe that's just catching him out a little bit there. Maybe the car is because obviously the weight transfer onto the front, because with it to happen twice,
that's
we don't
twice he's pointed it around the nose.
I know Julian's got a stiffer front end, and presumably, well, it obviously would help it to stop doing that.
It's a more anti-dive built into the suspension.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very interesting. Well, if we can find a way of answering that question, we will certainly try and do so as somebody goes off right outside our window. That's the number 7 Proton Porsche, another father and son combination. Christian, the son, and Gerald Reed, his father. And we saw that, in fact, this is the car that we saw no prisoners being taken with by Peter Cox earlier on in this particular series of corners. But I think
fire underneath there too.
Yes, he obviously believes that something is alight. I think it's probably just burst an oil line and a little blaze going on. Always good to see, I think, drivers having to put out their own fires. It always impresses me.
Placed fire extinguisher there. He obviously parked it deliberately.
I would have thought, though, that there might have been a handily placed marshal beside it, but perhaps that's just me. Well, the oil flags are out then on the run down to that final chicane, just before the hairpin that ends the lap. And so I do think a split oil line. Jamie Campbell-Walter comes through there with no problems. Oh, but right behind, somebody else has found that oil. Somebody else have found the oil.
I'm looking out the window and I can see...
the Belmondo car has come over the gravel. That's Mark Duez. Timmy Sugden came down that same escape road, or not escape road, but over the concrete rather than making it all the way through. And I really think in this low morning light they need to be waving that oil flag a lot more now. They've taken it in, which is a very bizarre concept, with cars going off left, right and centre. However, so Jamie Campbell-Walter avoids, dodges that bullet, as I believe we would probably say if we were doing the American Le Mans series instead of this, and still leads the race. 19 laps in, maybe 6 or 7 from the opening of a 3-stop pit window, maybe 5. We saw a few crews getting ready on the pit aprons earlier on. That may well be for some more NGT changes. I have to say I'm very surprised that we saw the 77 Red Bull car coming in so early. They've dropped down right now out of the top 20, and I feel that might have been more of a problem than a scheduled stop. Well, that's how we are then, some 19 laps into this 3-hour race. Jamie Campbell-Walter and Julian Bailey, the championship leaders, on top, ahead of championship rival Mike Hasemans in the second-placed Viper. More in a moment.